My son said I would get nothing from my ex-wife's $160 million will. Lawyer, you inherit all. He gets 15, you get $15? Dad. That was my son's final offer, his voice dripping with the satisfaction of a man about to inherit his mother's $160 million empire. He wanted me front and center at the will reading, not out of respect, but to watch my supposed insignificance etched into legal history. What he didn't know was that my ex-wife, even in death, had one last move to play. And I was the centerpiece of it. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. And remember, sometimes the quietest people have the most devastating plans. For 5 years, the hum of my wood planer had been my symphony. Each sharp whine was a note, every curl of walnut shaving a verse. Here in my small workshop in Austin, Texas, I wasn't a failed architect or a discarded husband. I was just a carpenter. A man who built honest things from broken pieces. My hands, calloused and scarred, knew the truth of the wood. It never lies. It doesn't deceive. It simply is, with all its knots and flaws on display. I respected that. The smell of sawdust and linseed oil had become the only cologne I wore. That morning I was shaping the armrest of a rocking chair, feeling the smooth curve form beneath my palms, when my piece shattered. The old flip phone on the cluttered workbench buzzed violently, its vibration cutting through the hum of the machine. I killed the planer. The silence that followed felt deafening. Wiping my hands on my dusty jeans, I glanced at the screen. 2 words stared back at me. Cold, unfamiliar, Nathan Thorne. 20 years. That's how long it had been since I'd last heard from him. 20 years without a single call that wasn't laced with accusation or disdain. No Christmas cards. No birthdays. Just a vast empty silence built brick by brick out of contempt. I thought that silence would last until one of us was buried. I suppose I was half right. I flipped the phone open. Hello? I said, my voice rough from disuse. Julian. His voice was sharp, clipped, belonging to a world a million miles from mine. The tone of New York City traffic and $1,000 suits. He never called me Dad anymore. To him I was just Julian, a name he spoke like an inconvenience. Your mother's gone, he said flatly. No sadness. No pause. Just a line read off a teleprompter, a stroke. It was fast. I stood there looking out the workshop window at the sunlit Texas yard. A strange numbness washed over me. Isabella, gone. The words didn't fit. She had always been a force of nature, brilliant, beautiful, and utterly destructive. To imagine her gone felt wrong. He must have grown impatient with my silence. Did you hear me? The funeral. I started, my throat dry. It's over, he interrupted. You weren't on the list. Listen. Her lawyer requires your presence for the will reading. This Friday, 10 a.m. sharp, Caldwell and Finch, Manhattan. Don't be late. It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. A command from a son who'd long crowned himself king of a world I no longer belonged to. I have no reason to be there, I said, steadying my tone. Your mother and I made everything clear 20 years ago. I have nothing that belongs to her, and she has nothing that belongs to me. He laughed, short, ugly, humorless, a sound that stripped away whatever humanity he had left. Oh, I know you're not getting a dime, he sneered. My mother despised you. But this is just procedure. You need to be there in person. A notarized confirmation of your irrelevance. He paused, letting the venom sink in. Personally, I just want to see your face. To watch that quiet fake dignity of yours crumble when it's read out loud. That's the only entertainment you're good for anymore. The cruelty was surgical. This wasn't anger. It was pleasure. The satisfaction of a predator toying with what he thought was prey. Are you finished? I asked quietly. Almost, he said, his tone smug. Don't worry about the ride home. I'll spot you $15 for the bus. Consider it a parting gift. Click. The line went dead. I stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. Only this time it wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Beneath the layers of sawdust and resignation, something deep inside me began to smolder. Slow, quiet, and deliberate. He hadn't invited me to a will reading. He had summoned me to a public execution. My execution, fine, I thought. He wanted a show. He would get one. I set the phone down carefully and looked at the half-finished rocking chair. My hand traced the smooth curve of the armrest, and solid, simple, honest. Then I turned toward the small house attached to the shop. In the back of my closet, behind the flannel shirts and worn jeans, hung a garment bag I hadn't touched in 2 decades. I unzipped it. Inside was my only suit, charcoal gray wool, the same one I'd worn on the day my old life ended. I would wear it again, for the beginning of his Friday morning. The cab from LaGuardia felt like traveling between worlds. Austin's sun-baked quiet had given way to Manhattan's cold steel. I paid the fare and stepped onto the sidewalk, the air sharp against my lungs. Caldwell and Finch's building didn't just stand, it loomed. A black tower of glass and granite. I pushed through the revolving doors, leaving behind the noise of the city. Inside, the air was thick with money and old power. The marble floors gleamed like frozen rivers. The mahogany walls smelled faintly of lemon oil, wealth made tangible. I had designed buildings all my life, but never one like this. This wasn't built for comfort. It was built to intimidate, and it worked. I caught sight of my reflection in the polished marble, the same charcoal suit, pressed as best I could, clean but 20 years out of style. Too broad in the shoulders, too heavy in the fabric. A relic. My shoes, old leather soles, made sharp, lonely clicks as I crossed the floor. A few young lawyers glanced up, eyes flickering over me before sliding away. In a single look, they'd placed me. Not a client, not a threat. Just irrelevant. Exactly as Nathan intended. At the reception desk, the young woman behind the marble counter didn't even bother to hide her disinterest. "Can I help you?" "I'm here for the 10 o'clock, I said. The reading of Isabella Thorne's will. Julian Thorne. Her smile faltered for a second, recognition without connection. She expected someone who looked like Nathan, not me. "Of course," she said finally, the politeness mechanical. "Mr. Harrison will be with you shortly. Please have a seat." I sat down on the edge of a black leather sofa, hands folded, calloused fingers resting on the old wool fabric. Around me everything gleamed, and the glass table, the art, the walls, but it all felt hollow. I was a ghost in a place that had already buried me, and yet that quiet ember inside me burned hotter. I wasn't here to be humiliated. I was here to finish something. Then I heard them. Laughter. The soft echo of expensive shoes against marble. Nathan. He entered the room the way only people raised by wealth do, as if the world were simply his to occupy. He wore a navy Tom Ford suit that fit like armor. His gold watch caught the light when he moved. His smile was that same one he'd worn as a boy, the smirk of someone who'd never been told no. Behind him were 2 shadows, a young woman, beautiful in that fragile, manufactured way, and a man with a tan too deep and teeth too white to be real. I'd learn later they were Sophia and Kyle, the girlfriend and the financial advisor. They weren't mourners. They were opportunists. Nathan strode to the desk. "Nathan Thorne," he said. "Mr. Harrison's expecting me." The receptionist, and who had barely looked at me, transformed into efficiency itself. "Of course, Mr. Thorne, please have a seat." Then he turned and saw me. For a moment he froze. Then that slow, cruel smile returned. "My God," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You actually came." His eyes dragged over me from the worn collar of my shirt to the scuffed edges of my shoes. "I guess you really do need that $15, huh, Sophia?" The girl giggled, a brittle, glassy sound. The man smirked, appraising me like a piece of old furniture left out in the rain. Nathan gestured lazily toward me. "This," he said with a deliberate pause that dripped with contempt, "is my father." He said father like it was an insult, like it was something shameful that clung to him. And for the first time in years I truly looked at him, not as my son, but as the creature my silence had allowed him to become. I said nothing. I just held his gaze, calm, steady, unflinching, and for a flicker of a second I saw it, a crack behind the arrogance. My silence had found its mark. He was waiting for a reaction, begging, pleading, anger, anything that could confirm his power over me. I gave him nothing. I just sat there, a ghost in a gray suit, watching the performance he'd rehearsed so carefully in his head. His smile began to tighten when he realized the silence wasn't breaking. The show wasn't going as planned. He turned away, trying to recover control. "So the first thing we do," he said to Kyle, "is liquidate the real estate portfolio." He stopped mid-sentence. The heavy oak door swung open. A tall man in his 60s entered, and the entire atmosphere shifted. It was as if the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mr. Harrison. He carried himself with quiet authority, not the kind born of wealth, but of absolute control. His gray suit was impeccable, his expression unreadable, the kind of face that didn't just see people, it evaluated them. Even Nathan straightened unconsciously. Harrison's eyes swept across the room, passing over Nathan and his entourage like they were nothing more than furniture. Then his gaze landed on me. For a brief moment, something flickered in his expression. Not pity, something closer to recognition. He walked toward me. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his tone level and respectful. "Thank you for coming." He didn't extend a hand, but his words were a handshake on their own, a simple acknowledgement of my right to be there. Then he turned to my son. "Mr. Thorne," he repeated. The same words, but colder, formal, stripped of warmth. The distinction was razor thin, but Nathan felt it. His jaw tightened. His entire existence was built on status and superiority. And the fact that I'd been acknowledged first was a direct insult to his carefully constructed throne. He forced a smirk. "Let's get this over with, Harrison," he snapped. "I've got a reservation at Parade to celebrate." "Don't intend to be late." Harrison didn't react. He simply nodded once. "As you wish," he gestured to the door. "This way, gentlemen." The conference room felt colder than the lobby, the kind of room designed not for comfort but for conquest. A massive mahogany table dominated the center, its dark surface polished to a mirror-like finish. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed not the sky, but the gray face of another skyscraper, a perfect view for people who only looked outward, never up. Nathan took the farthest seat, the one that marked him as the new head of the family, and leaned back like a king on his throne. Sophia and Kyle flanked him like loyal courtiers. I sat near the door, the seat for those who didn't matter. My calloused hands rested on the flawless table, rough skin against smooth polish. Mr. Harrison walked to the head of the table and placed a thick, leather-bound document in front of him. The soft thud echoed like a verdict. The air seemed to thin. He pulled out his chair, sat, and with calm precision reached into his pocket. He brought out a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, placed them on his nose, and opened the binder. "This," he began, his voice steady, "is the last will and testament of Isabella Montoya Thorne, dated August 4th of this year." Even from the grave, Isabella was making a statement. She had built her empire under her name, Montoya, the name that still echoed power and wealth. Nathan rolled his eyes, glancing impatiently at his watch. "First," Harrison continued, "I direct that all my just debts and funeral expenses be paid from my estate." He flipped a page. "Second, I give and bequeath the sum of $50,000 tax-free to my housekeeper, Maria Gonzalez, in gratitude for her 25 years of loyal service." Nathan sighed loudly. "Peanuts," he muttered to Kyle. But I smiled faintly. Maria. I remembered her kindness, the quiet woman who'd always offered me coffee after another one of Isabella's storms. She'd seen everything, said nothing, and stayed loyal. Isabella, for all her steel, could still recognize goodness when she saw it. Third, Harrison read, "I give and bequeath the sum of $100,000 to the Monarch Butterfly Preservation Fund." Sophia scoffed. "Butterflies?" she whispered. "Is she serious?" I froze, because I remembered. Years before the empire, before the lawsuits and the silence, Isabella and I had driven to Mexico. We hiked through the mountains to see the monarchs, millions of wings fluttering like fragments of sunlight. "It's like all the souls in the world flying home," she had whispered. And now, through this will, she had remembered that day too. It wasn't just charity. It was a message. Fourth, Harrison continued, "I give and bequeath the sum of $25,000 to my driver, Miguel Rodriguez, for his excellent service, and for never once commenting on the colorful guests my son brought home." Nathan shot upright. "What the hell does that mean?" Kyle leaned in. "It's nothing, Nathan. Just a joke," but Nathan's jaw was tightening. This wasn't going the way he'd planned. The spotlight was drifting. He started tapping his fingers on the table, sharp, impatient, rhythmical. Harrison ignored him completely. "Fifth," he said, "I give and bequeath my collection of first edition modernist poetry to the New York Public Library. Except for one volume, a 1922 edition of The Wasteland, which I leave to—" Nathan slammed his palm flat on the table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "For God's sake, Harrison," he shouted. "Can we skip the charity donations and the servants' tips? My time is valuable. Just get to the part where it all goes to me." The silence that followed was absolute. Harrison didn't flinch. He simply lifted his gaze. Then with calm precision he removed his glasses, folded them, and set them down. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it sliced through the air like a blade. "Mr. Thorne," he said, "this is not a negotiation. It is not a business meeting. It is the legal proclamation of a deceased woman's final wishes. You will sit, and you will listen. Is that clear?" Nathan's face flushed dark red. He wanted to fight back, but one look from Kyle told him not to. Harrison slipped his glasses back on, adjusted the pages, took a sip of water, and resumed. The authority in his composure was absolute. "Very well," he said calmly. "As I was saying—" He skimmed the next line, a faint smirk ghosting across his lips. No, that clause has been struck. Let's move on. Article 6, regarding the personal associates of my son." The tension in the room deepened. Kyle sat a little straighter, confidence returning, expecting a generous bonus. Sophia leaned forward, her phone forgotten, eyes glinting with greed. "To my son's financial advisor, Mr. Kyle Vance," Harrison read slowly, "I give and bequeath the sum of $5,000. The number hit the room like a slap. Kyle's grin froze. His knuckles whitened against the table. Harrison continued mercilessly. "This sum is given with the legally binding recommendation that he use it to enroll in a course on professional ethics. My own financial records show he has a significant need for one." Kyle went pale. His mask cracked. He turned toward Nathan in disbelief, his voice low and trembling with rage. "What the hell is this?" But Harrison wasn't done. "To my son's current companion, Sophia," he said, "I leave her the high-quality imitation handbag she attempted to swap for my authentic Birkin last month." The color drained from her face, then came rushing back in splotches of crimson. Her lips trembled. "That crazy old hag," she screeched. "She lied." "I never—" "Shut up," Nathan roared. The mask of charm shattered. His entire performance was collapsing. His entourage humiliated, his composure slipping. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "It doesn't matter. Who cares about a bag? Who cares about $5,000? Get on with it, Harrison." Read my part. I sat perfectly still, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt connected to Isabella again. This was the woman I'd married. Sharp, precise, unforgiving. She wasn't reading a will. She was delivering a reckoning. She was burning away the parasites before the real strike. Harrison waited until the shouting died down. Then, calm as ever, he said, "As I've already stated, Mr. Thorne, I will read every word. Now shall we continue?" The room fell silent. Kyle looked like he'd swallowed glass. Sophia trembled with fury. Harrison turned the page. "Article 7, he said, "To my son, Nathan Thorne." Nathan leaned forward, hunger blazing in his eyes. "I give and bequeath the penthouse apartment on Park Avenue." He exhaled loudly, a rush of pure relief. His grin returned triumphant. Then smugly he glanced across the table, first at Kyle, then at me. "The penthouse," he said. "Finally," Harrison continued, voice steady. "And my complete collection of Patek Philippe watches." Nathan laughed, his confidence flooding back. "Yes," he said. "Now we're talking. Hear that, old man?" He leaned back in his chair, eyes glittering. "The Pateks, all of them." He thought the victory was his. He didn't realize, and the real part hadn't even begun. Harrison raised a single finger. The gesture was small, but it stopped Nathan's celebration cold. "However," he said, that single word hung in the air like a blade suspended mid-swing. "The watch collection," Harrison continued, "is stored in a secure safe within the penthouse. The single key to that safe—" He paused deliberately, eyes tracing the words on the document before lifting them across the long mahogany table. "And finding mine, has been entrusted to his father, Julian Thorne." The silence that followed was absolute, so complete I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. Sophia and Kyle, still raw from their own humiliation, snapped their heads toward me. Nathan just stared, His face drained of color, his grin fading into disbelief. What? His voice was barely a whisper. Then louder, trembling with fury. What did you just say? The key, Harrison repeated calmly. Mr. Thorne entrusted it to your father. Nathan slammed both hands onto the table. The chair behind him screeched violently across the floor. What are you talking about? Is this some kind of sick joke? He pointed a shaking finger at me. Him? He hasn't seen her in 20 years. He doesn't even know where she lived. He's a nobody. Every eye turned to me and I was just as stunned as he was. A key? Isabella had given me a key? What did that even mean? Was it another one of her games, another way to twist the knife even from the grave? I had no key. No memory of one. No idea what anyone was talking about. I sat there, the ghost in the gray suit, suddenly and very uncomfortably the center of everyone's attention. Nathan's voice was breaking now, screaming through disbelief and rage. But I wasn't really there anymore. Harrison's quiet shuffle of papers, that soft whisper of heavy parchment, pulled me backward, 20 years into the past. Back to the night everything began to fall apart. It was 2005, 3 in the morning. Our house in Connecticut was dark except for one light. The one in Isabella's home office. I found her there. Not crying. Something worse. She sat motionless, staring at a wall of spreadsheets, her face pale. Blank and broken Montoya designs, the company that had been her life, her passion, her identity, and was bleeding out. She had overextended, pouring millions into a luxury resort in the Caribbean. The permits were bad, the land unstable, the partners corrupt. Everything she'd built was collapsing. The banks were calling in their loans. Her investors were threatening to sue. Bankruptcy wasn't just possible. It was imminent. I remember sitting beside her, the computer screen casting cold light across her face. It's over, Julian, she whispered. Everything I've built. It's gone. They're going to take the house. They're going to take everything. She wasn't afraid of losing money. We'd been poor before. She was terrified of losing status, of being seen as a fool. Her entire empire was built on her reputation as a genius, and now that reputation was about to be publicly executed. They're talking about criminal negligence, she said quietly. They're saying I misled them. I looked at her, the woman I'd loved, the mother of my son, and I knew she was drowning, and she was about to pull all of us down with her. The house turned into a tomb. The phone rang constantly. Angry bankers, betrayed investors, but Isabella just let it ring. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. She sat in that office day after day staring at the red numbers bleeding across her screen. Then one day a hand reached out, not from a bank, not from a friend. From an encrypted email routed through a server in the UAE, it was an offer. A private equity group based in Dubai claimed they'd been following Montoya designs. They wanted to help. Isabella was too paranoid to go, too broken. She begged me to meet them, so I did. 3 men met me in a sterile hotel conference room near JFK, impeccably dressed, expressionless. Their politeness felt sharper than a threat. They laid it out. A miracle on paper. $100 million. Immediate injection. Enough to stabilize the project, pay the banks, kill the lawsuits. I asked the only question that mattered. What do you want in return? The one with the faint British accent smiled and slid a thin leather folder across the table. We simply wish to invest in future projects, he said. We believe in the Montoya brand. I took the folder home. It felt heavier than paper should. Isabella tore it open the second she saw it. For 10 minutes she was ecstatic, laughing, crying, clutching the pages to her chest. We're saved, Julian. We're saved. But I read the fine print, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The investment was a blueprint for a crime. Look at this, I told her, pointing at the addendum. The projected costs, they're inflated by 40%. So what? She said, brushing it off. They're overpaying. That's their problem. No, I said. That's how it works. That's the point, I explained quietly. It's not an investment. It's laundering. They give us clean money now. We build their future projects, on paper, but we inflate every invoice. We funnel their dirty money through shell companies, and when it comes out the other end, it's clean. She froze. The color drained from her face. She understood. Finally, her company, her name, her life's work was being recruited to wash blood money. No, she whispered. I won't do it. Then we declare bankruptcy, I said flatly. It's over, she screamed. It was raw, primal, terrified. She clawed at her hair, pacing like a trapped animal. You don't understand, she shouted. If we go bankrupt, they'll investigate. They'll find everything. They'll say I committed fraud. They'll destroy me. It's better than this, I said. These people aren't bankers, Isabella. They're the mob. Or worse. She collapsed, just folded in on herself, sobbing on the rug. Please, Julian, she wept. I can't go to jail. I can't lose Montoya. It's who I am. If I lose it, I'm nothing. Then she looked up at me, broken and trembling. And Nathan? What about him? He's at Yale. You want him to be the son of a convict? A failure? She grabbed my hand, desperate. Please. There has to be a way. There wasn't. But I made one anyway. I looked at her, the woman who had built an empire, and I made the choice that would define the rest of my life. I pulled her to her feet. Stop crying, I said quietly. Go to bed. She looked at me confused. You're not signing anything, I told her. You won't attend meetings, you won't reply to emails. You'll design, you'll protect your name. Let me handle the rest, and I did. I became a ghost. While Isabella smiled for magazines, I disappeared into the shadows. I built the shell companies. Thorn Construction, Thorn Project Management, Thorn Architectural Supply, a labyrinth designed to keep the dirt from ever reaching her. The money flowed in. The company was saved. The lawsuits vanished. And Isabella, reborn as a financial genius, was celebrated in every business magazine. And then came the second part, the laundering. I signed the inflated contracts. I approved the fraudulent invoices. I oversaw every fake payment. By day, I was an architect. By night, I was a criminal, and I was good at it. Terrifyingly good. For 2 years, I lived that double life. Until one morning, 2 men in suits waited in my office. They didn't kick down the door. They didn't yell. They just laid out the evidence. Wire transfers, meetings, my signature on every page. They offered me a deal. Give us the organization, the agent said. Tell us who's behind it. I looked down at the file. My name was everywhere. Hers was nowhere. I could have told them the truth, that she'd begged me, that I'd done it all to save her. But I didn't. I took the fall. I confessed to negligence, tax evasion, fraud. Enough to destroy me, not her. I didn't go to prison. Isabella's lawyers made sure of that. But I lost everything else. My license, my reputation, my name. And that's when Nathan twisted the knife. He came home from Yale and told his mother I'd betrayed her. He called me a thief, a liar. And Isabella, seeing her company safe, her name clean, my name ruined, unbelieved him. She filed for divorce. She let the world think she was the victim. She let me burn. I blinked, the memory dissolving. The dark office in Connecticut faded back into the sterile mahogany conference room. Everyone was staring at me. Kyle looked calculating. Sophia curious. Nathan furious. The key, he spat. Where is it? What did she give you? He was convinced it was another conspiracy. One last cruel game between his parents. I searched my memory but found nothing. No key. No clue. I don't know what you're talking about, I said honestly. Nathan stared at me, disbelieving, then laughed. Harsh. Forced. It doesn't matter, he snapped. A key? I'll have the safe drilled open by lunch. This is nothing but another one of her stupid sentimental games. He leaned forward, every muscle tight with rage. Enough of the servants. Enough of the butterflies. Enough of the keys. He glared at Harrison. Get to the point. The main event. The assets. The 60 million. Read the part where it all comes to me, Nathan snapped. Mr. Harrison looked at my son over the rim of his glasses, calm, unflinching. He didn't raise his voice or show irritation. He simply let Nathan's demand hang there, letting its arrogance choke itself in the thick, suffocating silence. Then, with maddening patience, he adjusted his glasses, took a measured sip of water from a crystal glass, and turned the page. The sound of that thick, creamy paper flipping was deafening. It was the sound of a verdict being read. He was enjoying this, not out of malice but out of precision. He was following Isabella's script to the letter. Of course, Harrison said at last, his tone even detached. We will now proceed to Article 8, the disposition of the primary estate, the residue of all property, real and personal, wherever situated. This was it. The air felt heavy, charged. My pulse matched the ticking of the antique clock behind him. Nathan leaned forward, his entire body tense, greed and anticipation coiling in every muscle. Even Kyle and Sophia, still smarting from their earlier humiliation, leaned closer, hungry for the final moment that would make their embarrassment worthwhile. Harrison read on. The assets. The stocks, the controlling interest in Montoya Designs LLC. Then he stopped. He frowned slightly, studying the page as if something unexpected had appeared. He paused. Too long, too deliberately. He was building tension like a conductor leading an orchestra toward a final note. "Come on," Nathan hissed, his voice sharp and trembling. "Come on." Harrison cleared his throat. "I decree the following, first to my ex-husband, Julian Thorne." My head snapped up. "Me?" A strangled gasp tore from Nathan's throat. His face went rigid, pale 1 second, crimson the next. His eyes narrowed, filled with venom. He wasn't even breathing. What was she doing? Some cruel joke? Some twisted farewell? Harrison's voice stayed perfectly steady. "To my ex-husband, Julian Thorne, I give and bequeath the sum of $15. $15. The words hung there, sharp and absurd. Not an insult at a public execution, a humiliation dressed as a joke, but Harrison wasn't finished. $15 to be paid in cash, he continued, to cover the cost of the bus ride back to wherever it is he came from, a trip my son Nathan will surely be kind enough to suggest. A sound broke from Nathan, a snort that twisted into a full, uncontrollable laugh. It started low and ugly, then grew until it filled the room. It wasn't laughter. It was victory. Cruel, savage victory. He shot up from his chair, pointing at me, trembling with delight. Tears of malicious joy streaked down his face. $15, he roared. $15! The words echoed off the paneled walls. Kyle's face shifted, from humiliation to forced amusement. He saw a chance to crawl back into Nathan's good graces. Incredible, he muttered, smiling weakly. Sophia joined in with a shrill, nervous laugh. $15 for a bus ride. Oh, Nathan, she was hilarious. Nathan grinned wider, soaking it in. She always had a wicked sense of humor, he said proudly. Always, he'd won. In his mind, the game was over. The confusion about the key, the tension in the room, all meaningless now. This was his moment. He was the victor. He straightened his suit, smoothing his cuffs, regaining that smug, practiced composure. Then he looked at me. The humor drained from his face, replaced by something darker. Cold. Reptilian satisfaction. Well, he said softly, feigning pity. That's that. I suppose. He stepped around the table like a predator circling its prey. His eyes moved up and down my face, radiating disgust. It's over, old man, he said. You heard her. $15. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a slim alligator skin wallet, and opened it with exaggerated care. You know what? 15 feels a little cheap. He pulled out a crisp $20 bill and tossed it onto the table. It slid across the polished wood, stopping right in front of my hands. There. 20. Don't say I never gave you anything. He waited, daring me to reach for it, to lose control, but I didn't move. I just stared at the bill, then at him, and waited. I didn't feel humiliated. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel sad. Only a quiet, heavy anticipation, because I knew Isabella. And I knew this wasn't over. Harrison wasn't moving either. He sat perfectly still, eyes calm, expression unreadable. He was waiting too. Nathan's grin faltered. My silence unnerved him more than any outburst could have. What's the matter, old man? He sneered. Cat got your tongue? He laughed once, hollow and nervous. Whatever. It's done. It's all mine, finally. You can get the hell out of here now. Go back to your sawdust shed or wherever you crawled out of. Don't forget your bus money. He turned his back, dismissing me completely. Right, per se, he said, clapping Kyle on the shoulder. We've got champagne to drink. He was halfway into his jacket, triumphant again, when a single voice cut through the air, calm, cold, unyielding, Mr. Thorne. The sound froze him mid-motion. He turned slowly. His confident smile hardened into confusion. What? Mr. Harrison hadn't moved from his seat. But his eyes. They were no longer neutral. They were steel. Please sit down. Nathan blinked. What did you just say? I said, Harrison repeated quietly. Sit down. I have not finished reading. Nathan's laughter evaporated. Finished? You read it. $15. The joke's over. But Harrison reached down, not for the thick, leather-bound will already on the table, but for a second folder resting beside his briefcase. Plain manila, sealed with deep red wax. He placed it gently on the table. That, he said, tapping the original will, was the conclusion of the original testament. He rested his hand on the sealed folder. This is a codicil, a legally binding addendum. He looked directly at Nathan. It was signed, witnessed, and notarized 3 weeks ago, 1 week before your mother's stroke. The silence that followed was deafening. Its primary clause, he continued, glancing briefly at me, explicitly states that it supersedes and replaces all prior articles pertaining to the primary estate. Nathan sank into his chair like his strings had been cut. The color drained from his face. Kyle and Sophia froze, staring at the red seal as if it were a live explosive. Harrison broke the wax with a small knife. He unfolded a single sheet of paper attached to several others. He put on his glasses. This, he said, is a letter from your mother, addressed to you, Nathan, with legal instruction that it be read aloud here, in the presence of all parties. Its contents form the basis of the new Article 8. He began to read, and suddenly it wasn't his voice anymore. It was Isabella's, to my son Nathan. Harrison paused, then continued. I'm writing this because I am finally done being a coward. For 20 years I have let you believe a lie that I created, nurtured, and allowed to destroy a good man, your father. Nathan's lips parted, his voice barely a whisper. What? The story you grew up with, Harrison read. The story of your criminal, scheming father who betrayed me and stole from the company is a complete fabrication, the opposite of the truth. No. Nathan screamed, lunging across the table. She was sick, senile. That's not her. This is fake. He pointed at me, frantic. He got to her. He manipulated her. This is a scam. He turned to Kyle, desperate. We'll contest it. She wasn't competent. Tell him! Mr. Harrison didn't flinch. He raised a hand, silencing him. Then he lifted another document from the sealed folder. On that subject, he said coolly, attached to this codicil is a full 40-page psychiatric and cognitive evaluation of your mother, conducted by a panel of 3 independent, board-certified neurologists and psychiatrists, performed at her request, 72 hours before signing. He glanced up, voice like ice. In their expert, unanimous and legally binding opinion, your mother was, and I quote, entirely lucid in full command of her faculties, and possessed of a mental acuity superior to 99% of individuals in her age group. He dropped the report onto the table with a heavy thud. She was not insane, Mr. Thorne, he said quietly. She was finally done. Nathan made a small choking sound, his body slumped, eyes wide and vacant. Harrison returned to the letter. The truth, Nathan, is this, he read. 20 years ago, Montoya Designs was on the brink of collapse. I had made reckless choices. I trusted the wrong people. I was facing bankruptcy and worse, criminal charges. I was going to lose everything. The company. The house, my name. I was going to prison. I closed my eyes. I was back in that dark office, got her on the floor weeping, begging. We were given one way out, Harrison continued. A deal with a group of unsavory investors. A deal that would save the company, but would require us to launder their money through its operations. I was trapped. If I said no, I'd go to prison for fraud. If I said yes, I'd go to prison for money laundering. I was a coward. I broke. I was ready to let the entire world burn. And then she wrote the words that stopped my breath cold. And then, Harrison read softly, your father stepped in. I heard a small choked sound from my left. It was Nathan. He was shaking his head, his hands pressed over his ears as if he could block out the truth. Your father, Harrison read, the man you've spent 20 years calling a criminal, made a choice to protect me and to protect you. He took the deal. He put his own name, his own career, his own license on the line. He created the shell companies. He sat through the darkroom meetings. He handled the wire transfers. He did the dirty work so my name, the Montoya name, could stay clean. Harrison's voice didn't falter. It kept coming, cold and relentless. He funneled every ounce of risk onto himself. He built a legal firewall around me, around the company, and then stood in the fire. And when the FBI finally came, they came for him exactly as he planned. He confessed, Nathan. He confessed to crimes he never committed, negligence, fraud, anything to cover up the truth, that I was the one laundering money. I could barely breathe. He lost his license, his reputation, his career. He lost everything. And he did it for one reason, to save me. To save the company you now so arrogantly claim as your own. Harrison's voice softened, but the words cut deeper. And what did I do as reward for his sacrifice? I listened to you. I listened to your poison. You told me he was a criminal. You told me he had humiliated us. And in my shame and my cowardice, I agreed. I let that become the story. I divorced him. I abandoned him. I let our son treat him like trash because I was terrified that if you ever learned the truth, you'd look at me with the same contempt you had for him. My hands trembled under the table. I was a coward, Nathan. And I let you become this greedy, arrogant, empty shell of a man who mocks the very person who sacrificed everything so you could live this life. Harrison paused for a beat, his voice lowering into something that sounded almost like judgment. The $160 million fortune you were so eager to claim exists for one reason, because your father, Julian Thorne, saved it. The room was dead silent. The air felt heavy, almost unbreathable. Harrison's voice wasn't just reading. It was exhuming the truth from a grave 20 years deep. Nathan didn't move. He wasn't shaking his head anymore. He wasn't covering his ears. He just stared, blank, hollow, at the polished surface of the table. His face had gone waxy and pale. He looked like a man who had just been told the world was ending, and that it had always been his fault. Your father, Harrison continued, is not a criminal. He is not a failure. He is a hero. The kind of man who sacrifices everything, his life, his name, his legacy, just to keep others warm. And I let you treat him like garbage. I encouraged it. Every insult you threw at him was another brick in the wall I built to protect myself from the truth. The truth that I was the weak one. That I was the failure. That I was the one who betrayed this family. My fingers locked together on the table, white-knuckled. I could feel the sting of tears. Something I hadn't allowed myself in decades. But this wasn't sadness. It was something worse, vindication. A terrible 20-year late validation. Harrison's voice drove on. Every sentence a hammer blow tearing down the lies that had buried me. This $160 million empire, he read, does not exist because of you. It doesn't even exist because of me. It exists entirely because of Julian Thorne. Then the letter turned brutal. You, Nathan, have never worked a real day in your life. You've never built anything. You've never sacrificed anything. You are a parasite, a creature of appetite, feeding on the honor of the man you despise. You've spent your life judging the only person who ever earned the right to be proud. The words hit like stones. Nathan flinched as they landed, one after another. His lips moved, barely forming sound. No, he whispered, no. She didn't. She wouldn't. There was no anger left in him now. Just emptiness. The narrative he'd built his entire life around, his perfect mother, his worthless father, his rightful inheritance, had just been burned to ash. He slumped back in his chair, lifeless. His immaculate suit, the $10,000 armor of his arrogance, now hung loose on him. He looked small, lost, like a frightened boy trapped in a man's body. No, he whispered again, voice cracking. It's a lie. She did, Harrison said simply, and she had it all notarized. Then he turned the final page. And now, the conclusion. The room transformed, no longer a conference room but a courtroom, a confessional, a tomb. Nathan sat there, pale and broken. Kyle and Sophia were silent, their greed, their plans, their relevance gone in a single stroke. They were ghosts now, collateral in a war they never knew existed. Harrison straightened, his tone sharpening. This wasn't a confession anymore, it was judgment. Your mother's letter, he said, serves as the legal and moral preamble to her final will and testament. It supersedes all that came before it. He turned the last page. This is Article 8, the final disposition. He cleared his throat and began. Having stated the unvarnished truth and in an effort to correct insofar as money can, A betrayal that can never be undone. He paused, scanning the room. The silence was so complete I could hear the faint whir of the clock behind him. I hereby decree, as my final wish and binding testament, he continued, that all of my property, real and personal, all of my stocks, bonds, assets, and most importantly, my entire unencumbered controlling interest in Montoya Designs LLC, an estate valued at $160 million. He stopped, looked up and looked straight at me. My breath caught, my heart hammered. I give, devise, and bequeath, he said slowly, to my ex-husband, Julian Thorne. The words didn't hit me right away. They just hung there, heavy, unreal. I couldn't look at Nathan. I couldn't even move. It felt like the entire weight of the city was pressing down on my shoulders. $160 million. Montoya Designs. It wasn't a gift and it was a sentence. A life I had already buried being dragged back into the light. Mr. Harrison kept reading, steady and sure. I leave this not as a gift but as payment. As compensation for the career I destroyed, the honor I allowed to be stolen, and the family I was too cowardly to protect. And that was when I understood. It wasn't about the money. It never was. This was her confession, her apology, her final legally binding redemption. She was handing me back my name, my honor, telling the world it should have been mine all along. I looked down at my hands, rough, scarred, the hands of a builder, resting on that polished, perfect table. Hands that built, not schemed. And now somehow I owned an empire I'd never wanted. Across the table, Nathan made a small sound, a whimper. He wasn't a villain anymore. He wasn't even a man. Just a broken boy, his life built on a lie that had finally collapsed. Kyle and Sophia sat frozen, pale, silent, erased from the story. I looked at Harrison. He was watching me, calm, waiting. $160 million. The company, the legacy, Isabella. Even in death, she had the last word. She had exonerated me, made me whole, and in doing so, chained me to her legacy forever. She had given me everything, and somehow taken everything all over again. Nathan sat trembling, his mouth half open, his eyes blank and distant. The empire he believed he'd inherited had just vanished, handed to the man he despised most. He gasped like a drowning man, desperate for air. Kyle looked sick, a predator who just realized the carcass was gone. Sophia's porcelain mask cracked completely. Harrison was still reading. And now, he said, we come to the final bequest. He looked directly at Nathan. For my son, Nathan Thorne. Nathan flinched at his name. His eyes lit up, not with hope but with animal desperation. He waited for some small scrap, a lifeline, anything. Harrison's expression didn't change. For my son Nathan, he read, who has already received a lifetime's worth of fortune, both in the money he spent freely and in the sacrifices he never acknowledged. I leave him only one thing. He paused, looked up. I leave him precisely what he so thoughtfully and publicly offered to his father. Nathan blinked, confused, shattered. I don't understand. Harrison didn't answer. He reached into a drawer, withdrew a single item and placed it on the table. A check, a certified cashier's check for $15. Your inheritance, Mr. Thorne, Harrison said calmly. As your mother specified, yeah, for your bus fare. The silence that followed was suffocating. Kyle stood abruptly, straightened his suit, and walked out without a word. Gone. Sophia stayed. For a moment, then she looked at Nathan, at the wreck of the man she'd built her life around, and her face twisted with disgust. You're pathetic, she hissed, and turned on her heel, her heels clicking like gunshots across the marble floor until the door closed behind her. And then, there were three. The check, the table, and the ruin that was my son. He stared at that small piece of paper, motionless, pale, twitching, until something inside him broke. He screamed, a raw animal sound that shook the walls. No! He lunged, knocking over glasses, smashing crystal, screaming words that barely made sense. I'll sue you. I'll burn it all down. Then he saw me, and his rage found its target. You, he howled. You did this. You poisoned her. You thief. He charged across the table like an animal, but before he could reach me, the doors burst open. Two massive security guards stormed in, professional, expressionless, and caught him mid-lunge. He fought, screamed, kicked. "Get off me. I'm Nathan Thorne. I own this building." Mr. Harrison stood slowly. "Remove him." As they dragged Nathan toward the door, Harrison's voice cut through the chaos, calm and final. "Mr. Thorne," he said. Nathan turned, wild-eyed. "Don't forget your inheritance." That broke him. He screamed until his voice cracked, cursing his mother, cursing me, until the doors slammed shut and the sound disappeared into silence. And just like that, it was over. The chaos faded, leaving only stillness. My body sank into the chair, every bone heavy. 20 years of exhaustion finally catching up. There were only two of us now, me and Harrison. The man who delivered the truth and the man who had lived it. I looked at the wreckage, the broken glass, the overturned chairs, the $20 bill Nathan had thrown at me. Lying beside his $15 inheritance, the key, I said finally, my voice hoarse. The watches. Why did she do that? Why involve me in that? It was cruel. Mr. Harrison stopped shuffling his papers. He looked up at me, and for the first time that day, a genuine human smile touched the corners of his mouth. It was a small, sad, knowing smile. "Mr. Thorne," he said softly, "that was your wife's final test for her son." "A test?" I asked. He nodded. "And he failed spectacularly. She wanted to see if there was even a shred of humility left in him, if he could for once lower his pride and ask you for something. She wanted to know if there was still any part of him that could be redeemed." He sighed, the weight of his years showing in the gesture. "But it wasn't just a test for Nathan," he added. "It was a message for you." Reaching into his breast pocket, the same one he'd taken his glasses from earlier, he pulled out something small. It wasn't another legal folder or sealed envelope. It was a key, a small old-fashioned brass key. He slid it across the table. The metal made a soft, delicate tink as it stopped near my hand. "That," he said quietly, "is the key she left for you. It was never about the watches. That was just theater, a distraction to set the stage." I stared at the simple object lying between us. "Then what is this for?" I asked. "It's the key to the penthouse," Harrison said, "but not for the safe she mentioned. That one will be drilled open soon enough, and Nathan will find nothing but empty velvet boxes." That was her final joke. "Then what's this key really for?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. Harrison leaned forward. His eyes softened, but his tone carried weight. "There's another safe, Mr. Thorne, hidden behind a painting in her private study. This is the key to that safe." He paused, letting the silence stretch before speaking again. "Inside, you'll find the original evidence, everything. The complete unredacted 2005 file, the wire transfers, the shell company documents with your signature, and most importantly, the letters and emails she sent you pleading for your help." My heart stopped. "She kept it all," Harrison said quietly. "Every piece of it. She preserved the truth for 20 years. Her written confession was real, but this," he nodded toward the key, "this is the proof behind it. She wanted you to find it. She wanted you to decide whether to make it public or let it die with her. The money, that was her apology. But this key," his voice softened to almost a whisper, "this was her way of giving you back your name." I reached out, my rough, calloused fingers closing around the cool brass key. It felt heavier than it looked, like it carried the weight of 2 decades of silence, guilt, and redemption. The $160 million, that was a burden, a gilded prison I hadn't asked for. But this small key, this was freedom. Lesson and closing monologue, that experience taught me something powerful. The truth has a weight and a patience all its own. For 20 years, a lie poisoned an entire family, turning a son against the very father who had once saved him. But a lie built on silence and shame can't last forever. Eventually, truth finds its way to the surface. Isabella's final confession proved that real honor isn't about image or reputation. It's about the quiet, thankless sacrifices you make when no one is watching. And in the end, a name restored by truth is an inheritance far greater than any fortune. So I'll leave you with this question. What would you have done with that key and with the $160 million that came with it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.